Rewind of the Living Dead is a review show, so spoilers are ahead.
Back in 2007, directors Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez created an old-school drive-in movie double feature with their horror films Death Proof and Planet Terror, with several friends contributing trailers for fake movies, including one by Rob Zombie and another from Eli Roth. Roth's trailer not only gained attention, but there were almost immediately rumors that he would begin development on an actual feature film based on that 2-minute clip. Roth worked on a script, and there were several drafts over the years, but the film never came to fruition. That changed in early 2023 when it was announced Spyglass was producing Roth's horrific take on an iconic holiday turned bloody. The story centers around a riot on Black Friday that leaves several people dead, and 1 year later, a masked killer dressed like a pilgrim seeks revenge.
Mr. Pilgrim dressed in gray. Where will you be on Thanksgiving Day? Running around Planet Town, there's nowhere to hide. Do you like your turkey baked, or do you like it fried?
Let's see. Thanksgiving, exclusively in movie theaters November 17th.
In the latest episode of Rewind of the Living Dead, we're going to get the turkey ready, but there will be no leftovers when we review the 2023 horror film, Thanksgiving. Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I am Damon Martin.
And I be Brother Patrick Guerra.
Okay, let's just be clear. This film does not take place like the 1800s. Just to
yeah, just so we're clear that I'm just playing a pilgrim. Damn it!
You are. I was waiting for you to bust out your hat. I'm sure you got a Thanksgiving hat somewhere. Like, don't you?
I have one that's kind of like that. It's hard to get over the headphones over it though.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, we didn't. Neither one of us are dressed as turkeys and or some Thanksgiving.
I've been called a turkey many times in my life.
Some sort of inappropriate Thanksgiving garb, which I'm not going to even bust out for this one. Yes. This week we are reviewing the new Eli Roth slasher Thanksgiving, and I got to be upfront and honest about this, Patrick, before we get into the full review. Obviously, as we always mention, we're not going to get into spoilers quite yet. We will get there eventually, but if you haven't seen Thanksgiving, don't worry. We're not going to spoil the film at the start of the show. We will warn you when we get there. This was, I'll be honest with you, one of my most anticipated films of the year. I like Eli Roth. Like, I love Cabin Fever. I've enjoyed some of his movies, but what I like Eli Roth for more than even his filmmaking is his love of film. He does that show. He does the horror show for AMC, like the History of Horror. He did that for like 3 seasons, which is a blast. And he also did a podcast. And he did like 2 3-hour podcasts with Quentin Tarantino where they just talked about horror films for three hours. And I've listened to those podcasts numerous times. Like, Eli Roth is my horror equivalent of Kevin Smith. Like, I just love listening to Kevin Smith talk about movies. I love Kevin Smith movies too, but I'm saying, like, Eli Roth, I like a lot of his movies, but I know he's a massive horror fan. And so that combined with the trailer from 2007, Grindhouse, which I mentioned in the intro, and then knowing that this was going to be an Eli Roth slasher, which has been well documented on this show, Patrick. Slasher is my favorite genre of horror. This was all set up for me to like be suit. Now, to be fair, that also sets the expectations high because when I'm that excited for a film, it's easy to let me down.
And my expectations were high too. I'm not like crazy about Eli Roth movies, but I really respect his opinion on film. And I see him as like kind of an elder statesman of film and especially horror history. And, he has this incredibly storied history. His career is just laced in horror. That's just what he does. But I also know how much he appreciates it. So when this was coming out, I said, I'm getting a slasher from one of the really top directors out there in horror. That's just exciting. It just really is. You know what I mean? It's like saying, Quentin Tarantino is going to do another heist movie. And you're like, yeah, okay, that sounds like a good idea. Martin Scorsese going to do another gangster movie. Holy shit. Yeah, I'm in. Eli Roth going to do a slasher. My expectations went through the roof. They really did. Even though I'm not like the biggest fan of Cabin Fever and Hostel and Green Inferno were not like my favorite movies, but I knew what he was going for. When I watched those movies, I go, hell yeah, like I know what he's doing. And so, yeah, my expectations were high for this, but really, Damon, why are they so high? Because all the way back in 2007, when I had no clue who Damon Martin was, and he had no clue who Patrick Garrett was, and definitely didn't care who Patrick Garrett was, we were both for sure in the theater opening weekend for Grindhouse, which was an event. I'm there with my girlfriend. We're in a packed theater. This is before the days when you could pick your movie theater seats. So you had to stand in line for an hour or more to get a good seat. You get in there. The first movie plays, which is Planet Terror, and it blows the roof off the place because it's this fucking knockdown, drag out zombie apocalypse thing. It's wild. And then you get some trailers, Damon. And this trailer for Thanksgiving comes up. And it is pure genre. It's pure, like it just plucked right out of 1980. It looks that way. It's got the grainy 16 millimeter. Again, Eli Roth, very studious. So his shooting style, it just felt like it was pulling me right back into the early 80s. Some crazy kills, some crazy moments, right? Let's just say it, Damon. Somebody fucks a turkey in front of a bunch of people. It had the crowd raucous. I mean, the crowd just went nuts because we saw this trailer for Thanksgiving, and it has honestly never left the horror conversation since. Even my wife is like, when are they going to make a movie on that Thanksgiving trailer? It was so good. It stuck in the brains of everybody, and we've been waiting 25 years? No, 15 years?
16 years, 2007, so 16 years.
16 years we've been waiting. That's a long time to wait for something when it got teased all way back then. But it just, everybody went nuts. I know you went nuts in that theater. Knowing you now, you were just like, hell yeah, whatever that is, I want that.
Absolutely. It's been well documented. I'm a Quentin Tarantino fanboy, you know what I mean? And first and foremost, and I like Robert Rodriguez a lot. At that point, I was way into Desperado. Yeah. From Dusk Till Dawn, we reviewed that on the show. I love that movie. So when I hear they're doing a double feature, and it's like an old school double feature, like it's like, as I mentioned in the intro, it's a drive-in double feature. I was like, holy shit, I have to be there right away and see it. And it was such a cool one thing. I know you have kind of a bit of a love-hate relationship with Quentin Tarantino, but if there's one thing we can agree upon with Quentin Tarantino is that he loves cinema. He is like, you will not find a bigger fan of film and cinema than Quentin Tarantino, and he appreciates the magnitude of the cinema, of actually going to the theater. Like, he owns 2 theaters in LA. He just reopened, what is it, the Vista? Is it just
I think so.
And then obviously owns the New Beverly. For Quentin Tarantino, going to the movies is an event. I remember when I saw The Hateful Eight on Christmas Day when it opened, and they had the road show. They had the intermission, and it was like a big deal. It was I had a blast. I went on Christmas Day. I had a blast. It was a cool event. So when Grindhouse came out, like, they treated it like it was an event, and I appreciated that, because so often we go to the movies now, and don't get me wrong, after the pandemic, I learned to really appreciate the movies. Like, I always loved going to the theater, but after really having it taken away from me, I truly appreciate it now. But like, Grindhouse felt like an event, and the fact that they had Rob Zombie make a fake, which, by the way, I'm still waiting for the Werewolf Women of the SS to come out. That's another one from that one. But like, the fact that they went all out, like they had the intro with the "Let's all go to the lobby, let's all go," that one, and then they obviously the movies played. They had that late 70s, early 80s grimy feel to both movies, and they're so different. Of course, Planet Terror is a totally different film from Death Proof. The trailers were, I loved it. I don't want to go off on a whole like tangent about Grindhouse, but yeah, that trailer for Thanksgiving was so unique and funny and just creative, and immediately made people go like, hey, why isn't this a real movie? And it was just a fake trailer. Like, it was just a trailer for the fun of it. Like, they just asked their friends, like, hey, do you want to contribute? And Eli Roth's like, sure. And so because obviously Quentin Tarantino and Eli Roth are really close friends. So he's like, sure, I'll do it. And he made this trailer. And now 16 years later, he's turned it into a real movie. It's a slasher opening the week before things. It's perfect. I mean, and so, yeah, I admit, like, my expectations going into this film were unrealistically high, if I'm being honest. Like, I was super excited because it had everything I wanted. It was a callback to that 2007 feeling I got going to see Grindhouse. It was a slasher, which is my favorite genre. It was a follow-up 16 years later, so you've been like waiting 16 years for this to actually happen. Like, I went in sky high with expectations, and that's a dangerous game to play. It really is. Like, that's a dangerous game to play.
What was your crowd like? Because I'll tell you, I went on a Thursday night. You ended up going on a Friday night. My Thursday night crowd was smaller, and I would say surprisingly unenthusiastic. What was your crowd like?
So we actually went Friday during the day. So it was not that crowded, and it wasn't super enthusiastic, but it was just quiet. It was just, there wasn't a lot of people in there, but it was an afternoon show. It went to like a 4:00 show. So
right.
It wasn't like a nighttime crowd. So I can't say for sure. I do know the people who are in there. There was, I don't know how many people were in there, 10 or 15 people other than me and my girlfriend. And everyone seemed to be into it. They were, laughing at the right moments. They were jumping at the right moments. I wish I had seen it with a really raucous crowd. Would have been fun to see it like that. But yeah, no real complaints. But again, I didn't really see it at a time when people are like jonesing to go to the movie theater.
Right. Yeah, I think we might be both plagued by that experience overall, and like maybe we need to start going more to like more Friday night showings, because I think you get the full experience that way. Because I know and honestly, I know everybody that was in that crowd on a Thursday night. It was the last showing on a Thursday night. So it's the people who really wanted to see it. You know what I mean? Like, if you're going at 10 o'clock on a Thursday night, it's because you really want to see this movie. So at least I knew that everybody in there was enthusiastic. And I actually ended up talking to people who were in the theater with me about how they felt about the movie. They were sort of like, oh, it was okay. And they actually apologized to me and my brother. Shout out to Schwink. They said, oh, sorry if we were like laughing too loud. We just thought this movie was so ridiculous. And I don't know. I think there's a lot of bad movie watchers out there. I still have that feeling, because I'm a movie snob, Damon. I mean, let's be honest at this point. And I think they couldn't see a lot of the satire, parody. I mean, I think Eli Roth was really balancing that tonal line, don't you think?
Yeah, he was. I mean, listen, this is a movie that it is a slasher, and it is a throwback slasher. It is not like you could, like, obviously there are new age, like X, even though X takes place in the 70s, is a new age slasher. It doesn't feel like, even though people kind of compare it a little bit to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they mostly do that because the film is set in the 70s.
Yeah.
And it's in like a remote farm in the middle of nowhere. But really, it's nothing like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It just looks similar.
Yeah, it's got a very modern style. I think X is a very modern slasher.
But that's what I would call a modern slasher. Like, it's a slasher, but it's a different kind of slasher. This movie is a throwback. Now, to say that new movie-going audiences can't enjoy it, I think that's incorrect. I think absolutely you can go and enjoy this film, but you have to go in and set your expectations for what this film is. Mm-hmm. This is a film that will remind you of Friday the 13th, Halloween, the classics, you know what I mean? The Prowler and,
Silent Night, Deadly Night, My Bloody Valentine.
My Bloody Valentine was one that really rang to my mind. Obviously, that's also a holiday horror film. But yeah, like, that one rang to mind. Like, go in with it. If you go in with it, and that's not to say this isn't a good movie in other ways. I'm just saying, like, you can't go in there thinking they're reinventing the wheel. Because here's the thing with that, Patrick, and I know we talked about this last week when we reviewed It's a Wonderful Knife, and I'm not going to sit here and like turn this into a comparison podcast. But one of the biggest problems we had with It's a Wonderful Knife was that it's a movie that didn't need to be overly complicated, and they overcomplicated it for the sake of being overly complicated. It could have been a much simpler, much easier film to follow, and there was the the ingredients of what could have been a fun Christmas slasher. It got ruined by a multitude of issues, but the biggest one I think we agreed upon was they just tried too hard. They didn't need to go that far to like make it. And I think what Eli Roth did with Thanksgiving was, and I'm saying this as a compliment. I mean, when I say this, people are like, wow, that's not, when I say this, I mean this as a compliment. If there was a book written on how to make a slasher movie, if what's his name? What's Sean Cunningham, Wes Craven, and, the directors of the 80s all got together and said, here's how you make an 80s slasher film. Chapter 1, do this. Chapter 2, do this. Eli Roth went to the library, picked up that book, followed it, wrote a script, and then made this movie. And a lot of people say, wow, that's generic. No. It's a formulaic way to make a fun, yet still gruesome, slasher movie. And for a slasher fan like myself, Patrick, I was over the moon with that because I don't need them to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes I like when a film like Talk to Me comes out and it's so creative and so different in the possession genre, right? I had a huge amount of issues with what they tried to do with Exorcist Believer, which was ultimately just not a good film. Talk to Me, and let's say When Evil Lurks is another example, are possession films that took a genre and spun it in a different way, in a fun, creative way. Thanksgiving is not that. They didn't spin this in a fun, new way, but it's fun because it does remind you of the 80s, and that's what they're going for. He's not going in there saying this is the new definition of a 2023 slasher. And I appreciate that he keeps it simple with this movie.
Damon, we could sum up the issues we have with It's a Wonderful Knife, even Five Nights at Freddy's, which we also had issues with, and Thanksgiving, by asking ourselves a very simple question. Did it deliver on the promise of its premise? Now, some people out there going, what are you talking about? First of all, promise of the premise comes from Writers Blockbusters podcast. That's where I learned the phrase. And basically it just means like when they put out their promotional material, what were they selling me? It's a Wonderful Knife was selling me a Christmas slasher. We didn't get one. Five Nights at Freddy's was Chuck E. Cheese slasher. We didn't get that. Thanksgiving promised me Thanksgiving slasher. Guess what I got? Thanksgiving slasher. It made the promise of its premise. That's it. That's as simple as you can put it. It delivered on its premise. It really does. Now, actually, I'm going to disagree with you on something here. While, yes, I think the slasher elements very much reminded me of the 80s, and especially the that very, very first initial setup, without getting into spoilers. I think, weirdly, Eli Roth accidentally rehash sounds like an insult. It's not an insult. I'm just saying like what you were kind of saying. He was using the template of the late 90s slasher, because it does, as you mentioned in the intro, it starts with an incident happens at a store on Black Friday and some people die. And a year later, there is a killer out seeking revenge. Now, you could say, okay, well, but I've seen that in a lot of 80s slashers, but man, was that the thing in the 90s. I know what you did last summer. Like the Faculty, what's the other one?
Scream.
Huh? Scream. Is it Scream? So all these late 90s slashers, to me, I think what Eli Roth did was like, and I don't even think he did this intentionally. He goes, I'm going to make my 80s slasher, and this is how I'm going to set it up. But he actually used the late 90s setup, which was an incident, and then a year later, consequences for the people involved. Another one was a Final Destination. It's sort of a little bit. That's more supernatural.
Let me. I'm not disagreeing with you. But I will throw out one line that'll make you understand where I'm coming from here. It reminds me of the line in Scream, though, when Randy is talking to Stu in the video store, and he says, it's a very simple formula. If they watch Prom Night, they'd save time. Scream followed the Prom Night formula. Prom Night, which we reviewed on this show, is basically a tragic incident happens surrounding a bunch of people, and then years later, somebody seeks revenge. And kind of the same thing. They do sort of the same setup in other movies. But that's really what they did was the 90s. What Scream did was they're like, if you watch Prom Night, you save time. Well, they just followed that Prom Night formula, and then the 90s really did spit. So in a way, it's like Prom Night's the grandfather, Scream is the father, and this is the grandchild kind of thing. Like they're all of that chain of command, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I think what I would say is like Prom Night did it first, Scream did it better.
Oh,
absolutely. I think that's how I would put it. And then so I think whether consciously or unconsciously, like Eli Roth was just like, I'm just going to do it better. And it sort of comes out like Scream is what happens. Or it sort of comes out like I Know What You Did Last Summer, where, and also too, like I found the teens in this movie kind of a little more brooding. They have a little more of that kind of downtrodden feel to them, whereas the teens of the 80s and the late 70s sort of had a happy-go-lucky way to them. You know what I mean? Like it was almost like their world came crashing down when the slasher came into it. These kids already kind of start brooding and depressed, which is a very late 90s thing. Like we kind of cornered the market on brooding and depressing. And so these kids are a little more like that. They're a little more angsty. But then there was little touches again. Like I'm not going to like say it's only late 90s because there was a lot of it almost felt like the setup for like Nightmare on Elm Street a little bit. Like our lead was Nancy Thompson and her friends were sort of like a hodgepodge of weirdos. And I was like, why are these people friends? Like it bothers you in that weird way that like you let it go, but you're like, I still, in reality, I would never see these kids being friends, but they all are friends, and that works out, and it's fine, and it helps the dynamic, you know what I mean? Because there's always somebody pulling or pushing against what's going on.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and you're right. I mean, it does very much remind you of Rod from Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, Rod. Why was anyone ever a friend with Rod?
Yeah, being friends with Johnny Depp's character, like they would not be friends; they would hate each other in this high school.
Totally.
Yeah. No, I agree, and like I said, you're absolutely right. Like when I say like throwback to that, like Prom Night was the blueprint.
Yeah.
And Scream and I Know What You Did Last Night. Yeah, I Know What You Did Last Summer. Things like that. Like they took it and did it. I won't say better. They just did a better, updated version of it. Because I love Prom Night. I think Prom Night's great. But I'm saying like they did it better with more resources to do it. You know what I mean? Like Prom Night is a very low budget. Only something to work with here. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like this does feel like that as well. And I think people, we did the conversation with the David Winder, the director of the In Search of Darkness documentary series, and the new one that's coming out from 90 to 94 doesn't get into that late 90s slasher revival because Scream came out in 96. But I know we talked about that a little bit about how the 90s doesn't get nearly enough credit because the 90s is a weird relationship with horror fans. Like some people have grown to love it, but there are definitely other people who are like the horror genre died in 1990. Like they love the 80s. I disagree. I do think there was a slow period in the early 90s where it didn't quite have that same level of intensity and same level of interest, but when Scream came out in 96, it's been well documented on this show, Patrick, that's the film that got me back into horror and got me reignited to loving horror. So, yeah, like I agree. This does feel like that. Again, it's taking the classic slasher formula and just taking a couple twists and turns here and there and just making it great. I mean, I don't know a better way to say it. Like they're not reinventing the wheel with this film. If you're going in there thinking this is going to be a reinvention of the slasher genre, then you probably will be disappointed because it's not that. This is a classic slasher. And when I say classic, yeah, it's My Bloody Valentine, Prom Night, those films, but it's also Scream. It is I Know What You I got real I Know What You Did Last Summer vibes from this movie.
Big time.
I Know What You Did Last Summer. And I love that movie. When I rewatched I Know What You Did Last Summer for the first time in several years, I watched it last year when they had the 4K release. I watched it and I was like, first off, I still really love the movie. And we'll eventually, I'm sure we'll eventually review it on the show. Still love this movie, still a lot of fun, but I kind of forgotten how simple it was. Like it wasn't the most, it wasn't like the most creative film I'd ever watched, but it was fun.
Yeah.
And sometimes fun's enough, Patrick. Sometimes fun is what I need when I go to the movies. I don't need every film to be just like a thought-provoking, mind melding brain fest. Like, I don't need every film to be that way. Like, don't get me wrong. I love those movies and I love those horror films on occasion. You know what I mean? But sometimes I just want this is a fun popcorn horror flick.
And I think especially with slashers, you've got to go simple. I mean, silent, I'm not going to get into, I'm not going to get into It's a Wonderful Knife again, but it got complicated. Slashers are best when they're simple. They just are. Like, it's not a knock or anything. If you want to try the elevated slasher or whatever you want to do, slasher is slasher, meaning like every few minutes, give me a kill in a good, like that's what a slasher is about. It really is. And give me a great a great silhouette of a killer. And I think, Thanksgiving, like there's almost an unfair advantage. The pilgrim hat and the sort of the squared shoulder, like pilgrim like suit and everything, and like an all black with an axe, it just looks like that classic slasher look. And so it's got that going for it. And this movie doesn't overthink it. I mean, the incident that happens on Black Friday kicks everything off, and we just go from there. And we just wait while people get picked off. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, here's something I'm going to ask you, Damon. It's a little off topic, kinda. But my brother brought it up to me last night. He goes, "Man," I was really hoping it was going to look and feel throwback, because the trailer in 2007 very much looked like a trailer, like I said, from the 1980s. It was grainy. It was 16 mil. This is very modern. It uses modern technology. It uses social media as part of the story. Like Eli Roth leaned all the way into that. How do you feel about that? If that it wasn't it wasn't period correct. It wasn't like the original trailer sold us as like, oh, we're going to watch something from the 1980s. That's cool. Instead, it was just a very modern 2023 slasher. How'd you feel about that?
So it's funny. Okay, so I love when we get like inside baseball here and we talk about this stuff. Before the show started, before we reviewed the show, before we started the show, we were talking a little bit about that. We try not to talk about the movie too much before we start recording because we don't want to ruin anything. We really do come into this fresh. We don't really sit there and like pontificate for an hour before we record. We like to kind of be surprised by our opinions on here so we can react honestly. We're not just giving you rehashed conversations. Right before we started recording, Patrick, what did I say? I said I did have one criticism about this movie that I'll talk about during the show. This is what 4 years or whatever doing this show has done to us. We can read each other's minds at this point, because my one real criticism was this just felt too modern.
Yeah.
Like, I wanted it to look grainy and grimy and 80s or even 90s. You know what I mean? Like, I wanted it to have that look. Now, to be fair, they are showing this movie in 35 millimeter at the New Beverly and the Tarantino theaters out west. And I'd be curious to what this film looks like in film and not digital. But still, even beyond that, like, yes, I understand some of the tricks they play, which are in the trailer. They show like there's a trick where there's like people getting tagged on an Instagram post. Obviously, you can't do that if you set the film in the 80s. So I understand that. But I still, if nothing else, if you're gonna set it in modern times, you're gonna set it in 2023. All that, okay. Again, I'm fine with. I'm gonna move beyond all that and just say fine. But at least shoot it and make it look like it's that low budget, even though it's not. We know it's not. Like, we know it's not like a super cheap movie. You know what I mean? Like, they got named actors in here. It's not just some unknown, made in Canada. My Bloody Valentine films like that were back in the 80s. But I just wish they would have shot it and made it look like that Grindhouse feature. I'm not saying it had to be like super grainy, but like I would be interested to see what this film looks like on film. Like, that's
I would too.
My one major criticism was it just looked too clean. Now, that's not to say the film looks bad. It looks amazing. I just wish it had looked like that, like grainy VHS. Like, this is a kind of movie, like, I feel like I should see it. We always talk about the old video stores. We go in and you go to the horror section. You have the VHS covers, and that's how we used to pick movies to watch. We'd see a cover. It looked cool. We'd rent it and take it home and watch it, right? That's what Thanksgiving should have been. It should have looked like a VHS tape.
Yeah, it really should. I mean, I was missing that element of it, and I'm very curious to see. I was just looking up right now. They did shoot it on film. So to see it projected on super on 35 millimeter probably does give it a different experience. I know if there's ever a chance for me to see something projected on the film, I go see it. I saw Oppenheimer projected on film. It really did make a difference. Now that was on 70 millimeter IMAX, so it looked even crazier. But anytime I went to go see Joker on film, I went to go see a lot of different movies projected on film. It just takes you back to the magic era of film. There was just something about film grain puts space between you and the reality in the movie, and just that clean digital projection. And I know like Tarantino's very against digital projection. Like he's like, just give me a DVD player then. Like, why are you fucking with me? Like, you watch it projected on 35 and it has a different feel to it. You can even like, our eyes don't even necessarily like adjust to the way film moves now. So when you'll a lot of times when you go to sit down to watch a 35 millimeter film being projected, like the film looks a little fluttery the whole time. And you're like, it kind of looks like it's fluttering, because our eyes don't do that anymore. We don't look at film fluttering across the screen at us anymore. So our eyes have a different input for it. So it would be kind of nice to kind of look at it like that. I mean, I could try next week to go up to the New Beverly on Thanksgiving to try and see it, but I have a feeling I wouldn't get a ticket. I have a feeling it's going to be completely sold out.
Yeah, that like I said, that's a very minor criticism, I know, but that was my one thing walking out there. I was like, man, I wish this would have felt more like it was filmed in the 80s, or you know what I mean, just on film. And you're right. Maybe if I saw it the New Beverly on 35 millimeter, I would understand it better. But yeah, that's my one, like, just like a bit of a bummer, because otherwise, this film is everything you want it to be if you are a slasher fan. It is a exciting incident to start the film. A tragedy happens, which again is in the trailer. There's a Black Friday riot, people die, and then a year later, somebody starts looking for revenge. And then at that point, you're looking to like, who got harmed, who was responsible, who's being targeted, and then it becomes a mystery too. Like there's this masked pilgrim killer, then you're playing whodunit, just like the classic 90s, where you're like, who's the guy behind the Ghostface mask? Who's the guy with the fish hook? Who's the guy, that's like what it is. And so it turns into a whodunit with a group of people basically being hunted down by this killer looking for revenge for what happened. And let me also mention, by the way, we talk about the simplicity of this film and why it works so well. A Black Friday riot sounds so goofy, yet as a guy who used to go out on Black Friday for the fun of it, and like, terrible story. I was at a Best Buy one time on Black Friday. This is going back a few years, when they used to open the store at night, like midnight you go in, right? And I can't remember why I was going there. Maybe I was going for like a pair of headphones or something. I can't remember. But everyone, that's what it looks like. You rush in there and it is like a madhouse. And I'll never forget, I was in a bin looking for, I think it was headphones. I was looking for the particular headphones. They only had so many. So I was that guy rushing in to get the headphones. And this little like 6-year-old kid comes bolting at me, running away from his dad. And he runs into my leg and just literally bounces off me, like falls down. And the dad comes over running and grabs me. He's like, I'm so sorry. But like, I was just standing there and this kid just runs right into me and just bounces off me. I'm a 6'3" dude. So like a kid's not going to knock me over. But it was hilarious because I was like, and it was just a madhouse. So like it's such a goofy, such a goofy, inciting incident, a Black Friday riot in a store. But if you've ever been to Black Friday, Patrick, in the old days, like nowadays, it's not what it once was, because stores are opening at like 5:00 in the afternoon on Thanksgiving. Online sales happen. And this is set in modern times. So obviously, you could argue this wouldn't happen in this day and age. But if you ever went Black Friday shopping back in the day, I'm shocked more people didn't get shot and killed in these things, because it was a lunatic. I mean, I've never seen people more like ferociously acting towards each other than people rushing in to buy like $100 TV. Like it was that, like when I saw this, I laughed because I saw people get knocked over. I saw people like fighting in parking lots. This is real. Like so I was like, what a funny simple, inciting incident to have this happen. So it's a riot on Black Friday, people rushing into this department store where they're giving away 100 free waffle makers to open the day. Of course, it's funny, it's goofy, but it's also something that I could see really happening. And so they're not overcomplicating it. They're not saying it's not like the brother of my sister and his cousin, they went on a fishing trip and somebody fell out of the car. And when he fell out of the car, he rolled down the hill. When he rolled down the hill, he ran into a fisherman. The fisherman fell in. He hooked another guy, and that guy, they're not overcomplicated. It's a Black Friday riot. It's goofy, also rather, funny and real. As I used to go out Black Friday shopping, that's the incident. Bunch of people die. A year later, someone's trying to get revenge because there were people who died. Somebody is coming back for the people responsible. That's it. That's the premise. It doesn't need to be more than that.
Yeah, you understand the motive really quickly. And I feel like we can get into spoilers now, don't you think? Should we start spoilers?
Yeah, let's get into spoilers. So again, if you haven't seen Thanksgiving, it's in theaters right now. I think you can tell by our first part of this review that Patrick and I both enjoyed this film. And I always like to give people who maybe are listening to this who haven't seen it just kind of like a general feeling. I know, I'll just say it right now, Patrick, I loved it, and I'm loving it for what it was. It was a fun throwback slasher. I didn't need it to be more than that. I didn't want it to be more than that, and I really enjoyed it. And I know you might have slightly different feelings, but just before we get spoilers, I want people who may be pausing the podcast and let me go see it and come back. I really enjoyed this film. I would highly recommend going to see. If you are a slasher fan, if you are a fan of I Know What You Did Last Summer and Scream and My Bloody Valentine and Prom Night and The Prowler and all those movies from the 80s, you are going to love this movie.
Yeah, this movie delivers on the promise of the premise. Does it deliver perfectly? I mean, I have opinions on that, but it's still very much a slasher.
Yeah. So with that being said, let's get into spoilers. So again, if you haven't seen Thanksgiving in theaters now, go check it out. So Patrick, let's get into spoilers, and I'll let you open with that.
Yeah, so I mean, we might as well start with that inciting incident and what there was this element that I was not expecting. But once I realized, I'm like, oh, well, it's Eli Roth. This makes sense. Is how much Massachusetts was going to factor into the tone of the movie. Eli Roth is from Massachusetts. I think he's like a Bostonian or something like that, or at least the surrounding areas. If you know anything about the Boston area, and I know you grew up on the East Coast, so you know it better than I do. People from Boston and the surrounding Boston, Mass area, they have a way about them. And that colors a movie entirely differently. You and I both love the movie The Town. The Town would be a completely different movie if it was set in Ohio, or if it was set in California, or if it's set in New York. The fact that The Town is set in Boston and Massachusetts changes how it works completely, because people there are wired differently. And so that night, when everybody's gearing up to get into the Wright Mart, which is owned by what's his name? Thomas Wright, played by Rick Hoffman. He's kind of the town bigwig because he owns the big Walmart style store there, and he's gonna have a huge Black Friday sale. Well, he's having it in the Boston area. So all these Massachusetts motherfuckers, they're all hopped up. There was just a local football game, so everybody was fighting at that anyway. They're all pissed off at each other. They all hate each other. They all talk to each other like "fuck your mother," like the whole kit and caboodle. So they are riled up when they are pressing against the gates to get in there. And then this is where the history of this movie comes in, is that the young kids, Jess, played by Nell Verlaque, and her boyfriend Bobby and a couple of other friends, they got into some shit with some rival high school kids. But since Jess's dad owns the store, they get to go into the store early. They go inside while all these people are fucking rioting and getting pissed off and cussing out each other, and there's only 2 security guards guarding the whole thing. They see these kids inside and they're having a blast, and those kids are fucking rubbing it in their noses. Again, Boston, Mass, that whole attitude of fuck you, fuck your mother, I'm in here, I got a fucking waffle, you're not gonna do shit about it. That's the whole energy of it. and it's getting to this boiling point. And you're like, I was genuinely like nervous because I know the reputation of people in these parts of the country. And as soon as that gate came crashing down, I was like, this is going to be fucked. Like I wasn't ready for that at all. And when it fucking happened, a character dies, a very important character dies in a very like shocking way. We were all like, definitely me and my brother were like, holy shit. Like they just fucking ran Gina Gershon over. Like, what the fuck? Like it violent, like it felt Eli Roth in a very like grounded way, but I was not ready, Damon, for like, oh, he's going to give us a Boston massacre, a Boston slasher. It's so Boston.
Yeah, let me open by saying I've been to Boston many times. One of my favorite 5 cities I've ever visited.
Yeah, it's a cool town.
Like, I love Boston. New York is up there too, just to be clear. I love New York City.
Love New York.
But Boston is one of my favorite places. I've been there a few times, and I have an absolute blast every time. It is one of my favorite cities on earth. Yeah, this felt very, and when we get into performances, I'll talk a little bit about some of the not so great Boston accents. There's a fine line between like a good Boston accent and a comically bad Boston accent. I think Good Will Hunting is a great example of great Boston accents because they had real Boston kids in there. I think The Town does it pretty well. I actually met a couple of people when I went to Boston. They had just finished. The Town was coming out, and I actually met some of the extras from the movie, and they were authentically Boston. Like, I'm gonna go park the car, and we're gonna get fucking hammered at the bar. Like, so I will say that I did have that kind of a laugh. But also, to be clear, to be fair, when I say that, kind of like comically bad, some of it may have been on purpose because this is just a fun movie. Like they may have overextended the Boston accent just for the fun of it.
Oh yeah, it's a little extra painted.
Yeah, the opening scene and going into the riot, as you mentioned, you're absolutely right. And what I love about it, if I had one small criticism of a lot of my favorite slashers from the 80s, it's that the inciting incident is 2 minutes long. It's super quick.
Right.
Kid falls out of a window, somebody dies accidentally, and it's super quick. And you just kind of move on, then you get into the main story. Now, again, I understand they're just trying to get to the actual story. This takes time, and it builds.
Yeah, it's a good 15 minutes.
Yeah, the pressure builds. And there's like, the real inciting incident is, these kids were at a football game and they got into a fight with the rival high school. So one of our lead characters gets into a fight with another student from one of these other high schools. They go to this big box store, this Walmart style store of this small town in what is it? What town are they? Plymouth, Massachusetts.
Yeah, Plymouth, Mass. Yeah.
And they spot each other in the crowd, and the one kid who's like right up at the front of the gate trying to get in the store is like, screaming back at the other kid, like, fuck you, and like they're going at it. Well, of course, the one guy who's kind of shouting happens to also be friends with Jess, who is the daughter of the owner of the store. So they get in the back entrance. They got to go in and buy a phone. His phone got smashed during the fight. They need to go buy another phone before they go to the movies. That's their Thanksgiving tradition. And so they're going in the store, and they can't just buy the phone and just be in there. They got to taunt the kid on the outside. And so that just ignites it. And there's already people up front being like, I'm going to get the free waffle maker. Fuck you. You're not getting a free waffle maker.
Yeah, it's tense.
And it's gates and it's just a recipe for disaster. Like, it is 100% a recipe. And again, a lot of people in the modern era in 2023 who go on Amazon and buy their Black Friday gifts have never been through this. But as a guy who actually used to go Black Friday shopping back in the day, when they opened the stores at midnight and they would let you go in there, again, I'm being serious when I said I'm shocked there weren't more people like shot and killed at these things, because I have seen some madness at these stores. And that's why I stopped going. I went like twice. I went 1 year because there was a really good sale, like a legitimately good sale I wanted to get in on. And I'd never done it before, and I never understood the like insanity of Black Friday. Right. And the second year I was like, that was like, it was almost like a social experiment. Like I was like,
totally.
I want to see it again. Second, that was it though. I couldn't do it again. It was too insane. Like I'm like, I don't need to stand a 4-hour long line to buy. Like I'll just pay the extra $100. Like I don't care that much. Anyways, so I've been there. I've seen it. So while this is certainly a dramatized version, I really hope people aren't getting killed with shopping carts. Is what happened to poor Gina Gershon. The insanity of it, the way they ratchet up the pressure and intensity over, keep going until it just explodes, was perfect. They didn't just like storm the gates and go in and the inciting incident happens. Yeah. They built it up. There's a reason why the people on the outside are getting pissed off. Part of the crowd is just like, we want in, and you're telling us like, wait. And then the other part's like, hey, there's people in there already buying shit, the shit we want. They're in there. Why are they in there? They're not understanding this is the owner's daughter, and her friends are up on the counter taunting people like, look what I got, because it's a rival high school. All of it seems, while kind of goofy, believable. And then when they storm the gates, it's just fucking mayhem. And again, having been to Black Friday sales where a 6-year-old child bounced off my knee and went flying backwards, I wouldn't be shocked that some of this shit would happen in a real Black Friday sale. And it's gruesome and it's wild. One guy gets squashed by the crashing doors. Another guy gets his neck gashed open for the broken glass.
Yeah.
Gina Gershon just gets straight ganked by a fucking...
oh, my God.
Like a shopping cart. And they're like... And the two people with the shopping carts are just fighting. They only knows they just literally ran over a woman. It's madness and it's wild and it's fun.
And you know what's very important about the scene more than anything? It gives you a clear reason to make Jess and her friends the target of a slasher the year later. But because of the great buildup, and there's even more buildup even before that, where it's like you're with the sheriff's family, Sheriff Newland, played by Patrick Dempsey. You're with the sheriff's family and some workers from the Right Mart. They're kind of more blue collar people. And then you're with Jess's family, who are the white collar people. You get that build up ahead of time to establish the dynamics in the town. Then you get, the teens themselves and the shit that they're getting into and their dynamics. And then you get the inciting incident that makes them the targets of the slasher. But since it's such a large buildup, you create a situation where you go, well, it could have been anybody from that night. You don't know who to think of. That makes this movie, and what I was really enjoying about my experience with Thanksgiving was going, is it that guy? Or 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 is it that one? Or is it this one? Like, what's another movie that did that for us, Damon? Scream, right? Scream made you go, I don't trust anybody. And that's very much how this movie went for me. And it really did keep me guessing until the end. That's impressive. And by the way, so once the inciting incident goes off and you're a year later, then you're into a traditional slasher because people are going to start getting picked off. And as we mentioned, the killer uses a social media platform to target them specifically. Then you get into some classic 80s tropes like cops who are really bad at their jobs. You get that. You get, people getting killed in creative ways. And it's Eli Roth, and he doesn't like to pull his punches. He likes to fucking show you the goods. I really appreciate all of that stuff. I liked it all as a slasher goes. My biggest criticism with it is that it was sort of tonally all over the place. Like, it was really funny in the beginning. Funny, like all through the inciting incident and into the next year. It was goofy almost to the point of parody. It was almost a parody. And it was funny, and like people were really responding to that. Then that sort of just poof disappears. It's really weird how the funny just goes away, in my opinion. And so tonally it started to get a little imbalanced. And then there was one other thing that really got me, which was like the dialogue scenes, the scenes between the slashing, where they're basically the investigative scenes, were I found very slow and like sucked the energy out of the movie. It was really weird. And I was talking about it with a buddy of mine who went to go see it, and he absolutely loved it, but he did agree. He goes, yeah, those dialogue scenes, they were like 2 beats too long. And it just it's something about those scenes where I was just like, you'd start to kind of get bored. And you realize, like, if those scenes were trimmed somehow and you got to the slasher, like right before you think you'd get bored, the slash would come in and reignite you for the next round of investigation. And it's a minor criticism, but it did suck the air out of the room. And again, you and I both weren't in raucous crowds. My friend was. He was in a Thursday night crowd that was way into it, that was cheering during the title sequences and everything. It was like a film festival style crowd. So he got the full experience. But for me, that's like my biggest criticism, is that the tonal shift from like being a funny movie, and I thought it was really working, and then sort of abandoning that, and then just those dialogue scenes really dragging things down. But I'll be honest with you, Damon, it's not like 80s slashers didn't do that. It's not like he wasn't staying true to form. Like, he was going into the investigation, and boy, we've reviewed a few slashers on this show that you're just like, these dialogue scenes are painful. But this one, I wouldn't call them painful, but I was just like, they're just a touch too long.
So I'll agree and disagree with those 2 points. The one I'll disagree with a little bit, and it's not a big disagreement, it's more of just like my explanation of it, is the tonal shift. And the only reason I say that is because it is kind of goofy, and I agree, almost on the verge of parody at points. The only reason why I think it's okay that there's a big tonal shift is because of the tragedy. Because when they come back a year later, everything's changed. No one's exactly the same. You know, the town has changed because of the tragedy that happened. So in that regard, I understand.
Well, I'm saying it was even a year later, they were still funny. It just sort of it evaporated.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like they did almost on purpose, because they're trying to give it a more dour, you know, more downtrodden tone a little bit. That's my explanation of it. So I didn't mind that. I will agree with you a little bit on the dialogue scenes. They did drag on a little bit. They did kind of go on like a beat or two too long, like not excessively.
Yeah,
like it wasn't bad, but yeah, like you could have cut 30 seconds here or there, and I think it would have made it a little bit more effective. Especially because you're dealing with teenagers talking, and you know they're not pontificating on the Algonquin Round Table or anything. They're just teenagers, you know. So
not irreverent.
But again, I'm with you. Minor, like it didn't ruin anything. Certainly didn't make it bad. But I would agree. It did go a little long.
And not off brand. It's not like I can go back to the 80s ones and go, see, they did it right there. No, they did the same exact thing, and they usually did it worse. Truth be told, like they didn't even do it as well. So it was this certainly on brand.
And one other thing I want to point out, I hate keep going back to the Scream/Prom Night reference, but one thing again that Randy says in the video store, which is going back to Prom Night, which is it's a very simple formula. Everyone's a suspect. That's exactly what they do in Thanksgiving, because I spent, and I'm sure you did too, a big majority of the movie thinking, is it him? Is it her? Is it them? Who is it? It's not True Detective. It's not Seven. It's not The Usual Suspects, where you're like confounded and it's a brilliant twist. It's not that. But it is fun. It is to the point where you're like, you know what? It could be him, or it could be her, or it could be him. There's enough people involved in that inciting incident at the start to where a lot of people have a motive and a lot of people have reason to want other people dead. And so when people start getting picked off, you understand it, it makes sense, and you're drawn to the mystery of it, because you're like, who is it? Because I thought I had it figured at one point, and I was wrong. I thought I had
me too.
So we're in spoilers now at this point. So there's a lot of shit that happens in that Black Friday riot. Gina Gershon gets rolled over, which was one of the more gruesome ones. Literally, she gets scalped, basically. Her hair gets trapped under a shopping cart. It gets ripped off her head, I was like, damn, they did Gina Gershon dirty. We meet this kid, Bobby, at the beginning, who is the boyfriend of our lead character, Jess.
Jess, yeah.
And he is a pitching phenom. They call him the Golden Arm. He throws 97-mile-an-hour fastball. He's going to college, and he is going to go to Major League Baseball. Like, he is destined to play baseball in the pros. During the riot, he tries to there's a security guard who gets basically trampled when the crowd bursts through the doors. He gets basically trampled by the door, and he's laying there, like, dying. And so Bobby, in the goodness of his heart, goes over to try to rescue this guy who's just getting trampled on. And while he's rushing over to him, somebody steps on and literally just snaps his arm in the grossest possible compound fracture kind of way. And that ruins it. Like, he's never going to pitch again. And so, like, they kind of set him up, and then when he leaves town, he dumps Jess, he just ghosts her, and he's like, I'm gone. And then a year later, he's back, and they kind of paint a couple other people as, like, the potential, and he's, like, right back into Jess's life, and it felt very much, to me, like My Bloody Valentine, because My Bloody Valentine, sorry to spoil a movie that's 40 years old, the whole time it's this they think it's this serial killer who killed back years earlier who'd been sent to a mental institution. He escapes, and they're convinced it's him coming back to kill people in this town. What it really is actually the main miner, the guy who owns the mines in the town, is his son, who ends up being the killer. And you're kind of like, wow, that was a good twist. Like, that's what I love My Bloody Valentine. Part of the reason is that it is a cool twist when you find out who's the actual killer. This one, I actually thought, like, because they bring Bobby back and they made him, like, he's kind of suspicious at the start, but then you kind of realize, like, he's actually a good guy. Like, he's trying to help Jess. He's, you know, she's obviously still into him. And she has this new boyfriend who is, like, crushing on her from forever. And when this Bobby guy gets out of the picture, the new guy slips in. And he's finally got her. But then when Bobby comes back, he's kind of jealous. He's like, oh, shit, like, this is the guy she wanted to be with back then. So you kind of think maybe it's a new boyfriend. But at some point, I was convinced it was Bobby. Because I was like, you know what? This is too convenient that he's back. They're painting him to be too good of a guy. I think he's doing it. And also, the Pilgrim, the John Carver, the killer, is a little shorter, and Bobby in the movie's shorter. So I'm playing that game a little bit where I'm like, you know what? Height-wise, right. I think it could be him. It wasn't. That was the twist. They tried to actually show us it was him at one point. Like, they made us think it was him. It's not. But I like that. I like that I spent a big part of this movie thinking it could be him. It could be them. And I thought, you know what? They're not going to make it the boyfriend like Scream. They're going to make it the ex-boyfriend who got his arm ruined. And they kind, it was a little obvious, but then not, because it did make him seem like a good dude. And I was like, well, this is a little too convenient, but maybe that's what this is a slasher. Like, it's not supposed to be rocket science. And so they got me with that one too. I was like, damn, they got me. I thought it was him.
I actually thought, because at times I think the way they would show the Pilgrim, is that what they call him, the Pilgrim?
They call him the Pilgrim, John Carver.
John Carver.
John Carver mask.
They would shoot him in different ways to keep you guessing on his size. Like they kept playing with his scale. So I was like, it kind of looks like the new boyfriend. Like a little bit, like something like they're both. Anytime I saw John Carver, he was lean. So I was like, he's not one of the older dudes who was kind of there. Both of the older dudes who could have been suspects were like big and thick. So I was like, it's definitely not those guys. So I was like, could it be the new boyfriend? Because they kind of play him a little bit too. Like, you find out that night of the inciting incident, he was actually friends with the guard who got trampled. So you go, oh, he has a motive too. And then part of me was like, are they going to full blown Scream it? And is it going to be the new boyfriend and the ex-boyfriend? And it was like, he infiltrated her life to set everything up and get it ready. I was like, you know what all this was, Damon? It was engagement. I was engaged in the story. It was really good. It was again, Eli Roth, a very crafty filmmaker. Like, he's just been doing it a long time. He knows how to do it. So he's keeping you on your toes the whole time. And I don't know if you want to reveal the killer just yet, because we can talk about that in best performance, but I'll say this: he laid the groundwork. He lulled you into a great misdirection. And I was completely thrown by who it was finally. And it made so much sense for this part of I would have added this to the things that were bugging me with the movie until it was revealed who the killer was. And I was like, now it makes total sense why this part was bugging me. Because it was purposeful. The killer was purposely doing this. And so I don't know if you want to start getting into categories, because my best performance is indeed John Carver once we take the mask off and reveal who it is.
Well, let's get into that. Let's get into best performance in that, because I do want to talk about the killer of it all, because I think this is going to be a little bit bigger conversation than just best performance. But let's go ahead and talk about your best performance, and we'll kind of fade into our talk about the killer.
Turns out, everybody, spoiler time. You better turn this shit off if you don't want to know, because it is part of the fun to figure out who the killer is. But my best performance goes to Patrick Dempsey, who plays Sheriff Newland, who is indeed John Carver, the killer. All the way back, Damon, at the beginning of this movie, people are having a wonderful Thanksgiving dinner. Two families, one white collar family who owns the town Walmart, and they're all high society and fancy dressed, and the house looks nice. And then the sheriff knocks on the door of a humble little house, and there comes Gina Gershon to greet him at the door. How you doing, honey? How you been? Blah, blah, blah. And one of the workers from Wright Mart, who's going to be at Wright Mart later that night because Thomas Wright wants him to work on Thanksgiving night. It's a blue collar problem. So we're at this blue collar house for a little bit of the time. And you think nothing of it. The sheriff came, he baked a pie. He's giving it over to Gina Gershon. She gives him a kiss on the cheek, but she's with the blue collar worker guy who's going to go to the Wright Mart. So you never put two and two together that the sheriff and Gina Gershon were having a side romance. They never reveal it. The pie was the only giveaway. He baked a pie and he handed it to her, and they had a little discussion about. She said something to the effect of, "Oh, you know, a man in uniform who can bake, you won't be single for long." And that was it. They drop that little nugget in, then you get into the rest of the night and you're really building it up. You're spending time with the kids. You're spending time at the Wright Mart when all the shit goes down. Then a year later, you're with Jess and her friends and all that stuff. And indeed, when the shit goes down and the kids are being very directly targeted by this killer, what do? What do the kids and their parents wisely do, Damon? They go to the cops and they go, "Fucking protect our kids." And he's like, of course. Yeah, of course. and Patrick Dempsey, listen, now to kind of swing it all back around to performance. Patrick Dempsey's probably, I would say, the most storied actor of this group. He's the one that's got, I think, the most screen time in a leading performance. But he's kind of taking a backseat to these teens, obviously. But I trusted him, Damon. That's why he gets my best performance. I trusted him along with everybody else in this movie. And when the turn came and we found out that he was seeking revenge for the death of Gina Gershon, his secret love, and their love child.
Yeah,
that's right. That was a big reveal. You go, wow, this guy put it over on me. And that was a performance. I never once suspected him. He never once acted guilty. He never had a tell. I just loved it. I ate it all up and I go, that's it. That's my best performance because I trusted him as much as anybody else would have in that movie.
So first of all, Patrick Dempsey's done a lot of things for me. He will always be Can't Buy Me Love. I love that movie.
Mm-hmm.
That movie, I absolutely. Long before he was McDreamy or he was in Scream 3, which I do like. I know Scream 3 is a much maligned movie, but I love Scream 3, and he's great in that movie. I loved him as Can't Buy Me Love guy. Let me just go ahead and start there.
And Damon, I interviewed him because he's a race car driver, and I shoot a lot of motorsports stuff. So I interviewed him at 24 Hours of Daytona. He's a hell of a guy.
Yeah, seems like a super nice guy. I am a Patrick Dempsey fan. He got me. I didn't see it coming. And what I love, this again goes back to the classic slasher. This is again paint by numbers, but doing it the right way. When you reveal that Patrick Dempsey is the killer, they do the flashbacks, and you're like, oh, like even though you never knew they were having. If you knew they were having an affair, of course you're going to start thinking it's him.
Right.
But the little hints they gave you, the little interaction at dinner, the pie, and then there is a moment during the melee, during the riot, when Gina Gershon's character gets killed. She gets run over by a shopping cart, and her head gets basically bashed in because she falls down and someone hits her with the side of a shopping cart. She gets killed. She rolls over and she's laying there dead with her eyes open. And Patrick Dempsey's character comes in as the sheriff and he's trying to like calm everybody down. He spots her and he gets this horrific look on his face. Now, at the time, it's a friend. We know it's a friend of his. But
he just went to her house for Thanksgiving.
She basically got scalped. Like a part of her hair got caught in a shopping cart and it gets ripped off. So it's a pretty horrific scene. So he looks shocked when he sees her and you understand why he looks shocked. But when they do the flashback, and he explains who she is, now you know why he's so shocked. It's subtle. It was. I loved it. It was a great reveal. They got me. And also, one thing I want to point out, you mentioned it, the inept cops. Why were the cops inept? The killer is the cop. He's keeping them inept. And
I kept going, why the fuck are these cops letting these kids run around? Why don't they go, you're staying at the station, you're not going anywhere? He let them go everywhere because he was getting the info to stay 2 steps ahead.
And and again, this is like how it all plays out. Again, you mentioned the Scream, very Scream-esque, where Jess comes to him multiple times. The security camera footage from the store the night of the riot gets deleted somehow. It all disappears. So that's another part of the big controversy, is that, like, what happened to it? We've come to find out it was the store owner's fiance, who is stepmother to our lead character Jess, and they do not like each other at all. She's the one who went in there and deleted it, because she's like, this is the way I'm going to save the store. I'm going to save my husband or my future husband. I'm going to delete this so no one can see how it all happened, because there were already lawsuits filed and blah, blah, blah. So the sheriff never saw it because it had been deleted. Well, Jess gets the bright idea, oh yeah, it's the cloud. Like, these things get backed up, and my dad's computer probably has access to that save for a year. I bet you I could find that night. Like, she wouldn't have thought to delete the entire file. It's just deleted from the computer, which is real. Like, that actually happens.
Yeah.
So she goes and she finds it. So she prints out a bunch of screenshots of the melee, the things that they didn't see, because people were filming on their cameras, on their phones. So there's like snippets on the internet and things like that. But the full picture was never revealed because the security camera footage was lost. Well, Jess finds it, does her research, and that's how she sees the security footage of her current boyfriend doing the bro hug with one of the security guards. Like, how did the guy who got trampled? Like, that, no one knew that. Then she gets different views from above where they see who's running over people with shopping carts and who's storming the gates, all this kind of stuff. She takes it to the sheriff. Look what I got, Sheriff. I got these screenshots. And he's like, you're going to be a big help to me in this case. Thank you. And we're thinking, wow, sheriff's going to solve it. Nope. And at the end, when he finally reveals it, he's like, I told you we're going to be a big help. Yeah. I loved it. I fucking loved that because it all came back around.
And who does he target first, Damon? Who's the very first kill? Because once he gets that information from her, he finds out that the person who hit and killed Gina Gershon was the woman at the diner, who you get to know a lot during the buildup of the Black Friday sale. She's in the front fighting with people, telling people to fuck off. She's got a loud mouth. And then that's the very famous kill from the trailer of him dunking her head in the diner kitchen water and then putting her head against the frozen freezer door. Because now he knows who did it, so he gets her first. And that's the big message, is like, you just killed my lady love, and no one else is safe from here on out. And he targets everybody based on that information that Jess gave him. It's fucking... Damon, it is literally the best part of this movie is how they craft the killer's motivation and his execution. This is what you're going to get from an Eli Roth level director. Is like really, really tight storytelling. Then, and truth be told, like, it's very impressive. I just didn't see it coming and knocked me on my ass. And that's hard to do these days. It really is.
Yeah. And I like this, but I will throw out one slight criticism of Patrick Dempsey in this movie.
Let's do it.
Did you notice he kind of slipped in and out of that Boston accent? Like,
totally. And I did almost see it though as like he really started slipping out of it at the end, and I felt like that was almost to signify that the change, like, I'm not your friend anymore, I'm the killer, and so I sound different. That's how it felt to me. But I did see he didn't seem like he was like nailing the Boston accent the whole time. But I want to say Patrick Dempsey is from Mass.
He might be.
I think he is. But I mean, I that's how I took it, was like, because it really goes away at the end. But I took it as it's a change in character.
He was born in Lewiston, Maine, so he's from the Northeast.
Okay, so he's like, it's kind of New England-y. Maine's they got New England accents in Maine.
Yeah, but I did notice he kind of slipped out of a few times where he's talking.
A little bit.
You hear the we're gonna go park the car, and then he kind of slips out of it a little bit. It was kind of funny in a way. I was like, all right, This is like, but it felt like, Friday the 13th when someone has an accent and then suddenly they don't. You're like, it's a Friday the 13th movie. I don't expect it to be genius. But I did notice that with him. He's a good actor. Don't get me wrong, but I did notice that he slipped out of the old Boston accent a few times. So for me, best performance, I had a couple different options. Also, I do want to give credit. When Gina Gershon popped up at the beginning, because Gina Gershon is one of the bigger named actors in this movie, and she died right away, I was like, the fuck? They killed Gina Gershon pretty quick. And then it came back around that she ended up being a major part of the story, even though she's in the movie for 5 minutes. Ends up being a major part of the story. I did enjoy that, because when she gets killed, I'm like, Jesus Christ, they just killed Gina Gershon fucking quick. Anyways, I just want to point that out. I should have known. Because you don't kill a major actor like that and not have it matter.
Yeah.
So for my best performance, I went with, and I admit I'm going with this a little bit off kilter a little bit for this one. I'm going with Nell Verlaque, who played Jessica, our lead character, Jess. Couple of reasons. One, this is a group of friends, and while Jess is definitely the lead, like she's the daughter of the store owner, she gets her friends in the back door, so she's technically responsible, things like that. The friend group feels pretty even. Like they don't just, she's not Sidney Prescott. Like they're not putting her front and center, and then she has a cast of like supporting. All the friends kind of feel like they all own an equal piece of the friendship group, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
Jess is our leader. Jess is our lead character, but in a 100% way, she's 20%. She's not 75% of the story, which I
Right.
appreciated, because then you do get to know these other characters. Like there's a character named Yulia, there's a character named Scuba, her boyfriend, her ex-boyfriend. They all get like enough screen time where you're not just focused on her. But where I liked her performance is she, of course, plays our final girl in a way. And she's the lead. She's the one who eventually gets the big showdown with the killer. So, of course, she's kind of like our final girl. I'll be honest, never heard of Nell Verlaque before today when I saw the movie. Didn't know who she was, didn't know her name. Looked her up. She didn't have a Wikipedia page. And I'm not saying that as an insult. I'm just saying
she's lesser known.
She's an unknown. To pull it off and do it well, blown away. Like it's a super impressive, because even when you look at like when they had like this feels like the 80s slashers when you didn't know anybody in these films. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like, and
They were all
a lot of these people in those films never went on to do anything either. Like they didn't go on to have they weren't Jamie Lee Curtis in Prom Night and Halloween, and she goes on to win an Academy Award. It's not even Kevin Bacon in Friday the 13th. Like this is I had never heard her. I looked her up. I was like, wow, she really hasn't done a lot. She's been in some TV episodes, things like this. This is a situation where Eli Roth and the casting director deserve credit, because they found a solid lead actor who was an unknown. And I appreciate it. I thought she did a great job. She carried the horror well. She carried the concern well. Like she was the classic atypical final girl where she was like, we shouldn't be doing this. This is all bad. She had the guilt from that night of the big Black Friday riot. Like she had it, all that. And so she is our Jennifer Love Hewitt in I Know What You Did Last Summer. She is, in a way, a little bit of our Sidney Prescott. Like she is the lead, but yet she is not. And I thought her performance was great. I thought for a completely unknown to sit in there and step into this role and act opposite more established character actors and take on a lead role, I thought she did great.
She was given big Jennifer Love Hewitt, Sidney Prescott's vibes, like big time, which is the late 90s sullen, kind of emo-y, like angsty teen. Like it doesn't play 80s to me. The only difference is that yes, she is obviously like considered the final girl, but it's way more sort of like she's the moral center, and she's giving those vibes in a very big way. It was the evolution of the final girl, which ended up being the Sidney Prescott, Jennifer Love Hewitt type character. So yeah, I see exactly where you're going with that, and especially the fact that she was the small fish in the big pond, because there's plenty of players in this movie, and she held her own.
Also, I want to give a shout out. Also, I'm not like I am on social media a lot. I know that Addison Rae is one of the actors in this movie, and she is a massive influencer, like a huge influencer star. I don't know her. I know the name. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say I don't know the name. She plays a supporting character. I thought she did great. Like I wasn't super familiar with her as like a TikTok star or whatever I know she's got a massive TikTok following. Wasn't super like where I didn't really know her, but I knew her name. I thought she did great too. Like she didn't seem like she didn't strike me as like, oh, this is an influencer trying to be an actor. I thought she did good.
I'm going to tell you something right now, Damon. Remember House of Wax and everybody was fucking up in arms because Paris Hilton was in it?
Yeah.
You remember those days? This is early 2000s. How apropos, since we're kind of dancing around these decades. Paris Hilton did fine in that. Like it was fine. Like it's rare that somebody's like stinks out loud. Yeah. Like it happens. It certainly happens. But I'm not handing Addison Rae the one testicle award tonight. Like there's no one testicle award tonight. She did fine. She blended right in. And that's actually, if you're kind of an outsider in that respect, maybe it's just better to just blend in and not try to stand out and not try to be extra. I had no idea that she was a big influence or anything like that. She just blended into a cast of characters.
To that point, funny enough, I knew the name when the movie was going. I didn't know which one she was.
Right. Yeah, I would have had no idea.
I knew the name. I knew the name Addison Rae. I knew she was a TikTok star, but I didn't know her. So when I watched the movie, I didn't know which one. When I got home, I looked her up. I was like, oh, that was her? She did a great job. Like, that's how I did. She wasn't like when Paris Hilton was in that movie, I knew who Paris Hilton was. Like, I definitely knew who she was at that time. But
we're also collectively 600 years old, you and I. Like, exactly. So.
But
we were younger when Paris was in that movie.
But I appreciated that because I knew the name. I knew she was in this movie, but I swear to God, I didn't know which one she was. And
yeah,
then when it was over, I looked up all the characters, like, oh, she was like the second friend.
Mm-hmm.
She did a great job. I thought she did, for what it was, like, I thought she did a great job. So just want to throw that out there.
Did her homework.
Let's talk about favorite character because there are some characters in this movie.
Oh, there's a lot of characters.
Can I go first on this one?
Please, Damon.
All right. So what's funny is I know your answer, so I'm gonna give a slight spoiler. Neither one of our answers are anything with the main lead characters. Now, to be fair, not that the lead characters, I almost went with Scuba, who is the brutish big football player guy who's like the other, and ends up being a pretty good character. Like he doesn't end up being like a goofy character. He ends up being a good character. But I liked him. He was the kind of the take charge guy. Like, fuck it, we're not gonna stand around and just get slaughtered. We're gonna fight back. Kind of appreciate it. Almost went that route. I liked him, but I went with McCarty. He is the local. He's the son of the local gun dealer, the gun shop owner, and he's like the guy who throws parties for the underage kids. He's a kid himself. He's like a teenager, but like he throws the parties. And
I think he's in like his 20s. I think is what they say.
I don't know how old he is, but he's like, he's the one who like he supplies the kid. But he's like, when the whole killing starts happening, he's like, hey, if you want guns, come see me, and I'm gonna buy. But here's why McCarty is my favorite character. And you know where I'm going with this, Patrick.
I do.
It's great. He's throwing a party the night of the year later party. He's throwing a party that night, and he's at the front entrance letting people in, and these kids come up. They're like 14, 15-year-old kids trying to get into the party, and he starts talking to them about Black Sabbath, and he's like, it's like when Black Sabbath got rid of Ozzy Osbourne. Everyone thought they were over, and then here comes this little 5'0" little guy named Ronnie James Dio. And he stepped in there and he belted out some great tunes. And they found heights that they reached heights they had never reached before when Ronnie James Dio stepped in and started singing for Black Sabbath. And the kid goes, who's Black Sabbath? And McCarty goes, get the fuck off my property. Two things about that scene I love. One, get the fuck off my property. If you don't know who Black Sabbath is, you got no place here. But get out. And I love this is I don't know if Eli Roth is a Black Sabbath fan. I have to imagine this was him or his co-writer injecting this into the script. I'm a big Black Sabbath fan. I actually saw them on the reunion tour years ago, and I saw Ozzy singing with them. It was amazing. So I'm not gonna sit here and say I don't love the Ozzy version, but I am a huge Ronnie James Dio fan. I love Dio. I own a bunch of Dio vinyl. I love Black Sabbath with Dio. So when he did that little speech and he's like, but then Ronnie James Dio stepped in, I was like, fuck yeah, man. And then when the kid said, "Who's Black Sabbath?" he's just like, "Get the fuck out of here.
Get the fuck off my property."
This is my dude. That's my dude." So I was like, McCarty's my character.
Damon, "Sign of the Southern Cross" is my favorite Black Sabbath song, and that's a Ronnie James Dio song. So yeah, I get it. I spent all day at Ronnie James Dio's tomb with my buddy Jeff because we're a couple of metalheads. Like, so we just fucking had a picnic there one day. Like, yeah, like it's one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
So that's my favorite character. McCarty,
Yeah.
Your Black Sabbath speech made you my favorite character by a wide margin.
And it feels very, again, when I was talking about in the very beginning of our spoiler section, like very Boston-y, very Mass. And like like that character especially gave like Mass vibes out of all the characters. He felt so authentic. He didn't feel like he was acting at all.
He's the perfect like side character. Like he's not a lead character in any way. You know what I mean? But he's like the perfect, like he's the guy who comes in, a little bit of comic relief. He's also the guy who supplies Scuba with a gun. Like he's like understands there's real danger, and he's like, listen, here's here's what you do, here's what you can protect yourself with, and like he's sketchy. He's a sketchy dude, but also like he's kind of like the a little bit of a he's like the side character. He's not one of the leads. He's not in danger. People aren't trying to hunt for him. But I loved it. I loved the character, and that little Black Sabbath speech just got me. So that's my favorite character.
Yeah, and my favorite character was also a character. You know what I mean? Like this was a movie that had a lot of characters in it. And it was the security guard, which I don't think you ever get his actual name. I can't remember if you do or not, but it's played by the comedian Tim Dillon. And Tim Dillon, just another one. It's like, it's funny. We both pick guys that just fucking scream, "I'm from the Boston area." Like it's that kind of thing. And like, he's a security guard at the beginning, like talking shit to people. And then eventually he's like, as the gates come crashing down, he's like, fuck this. And he like runs. He runs and doesn't do his job, which by the way, I don't blame him because they were seriously understaffed. Him and one other guy could not stop 500 pissed off Bostonians from getting into the store. There was no chance they were just going to get trampled and killed. So he runs and he becomes one of the targets too. And then he just has a great sequence where he's going to get slashed, but he's about to duck out of town for Thanksgiving because he knows shit's going to go down, and he's got his cat there and he's waiting for his Uber driver and all this shit. And then the shit goes down in his house. And it's funny and hilarious because he puts that fucking Boston stank on it that makes it hilarious and funny.
He was great. He was great because when he's outside trying to do crowd control, you can already tell he's kind of like, fuck this. And then when it actually pops off, he's just like, I'm out of here. And guess what? I probably would have done the same exact thing.
Preserve yourself at that point.
Yeah, and then the revenge is, well, hey, you had a job to play, so you were paid to be security, and you didn't do your job. That's why your boy got trampled. Like, the other guy got fucking trampled trying to stop the crowd, and then he just runs off. So, yeah, like, you got to get it. And he also... I loved his death scene. Like when the carver comes in and gets him, he stabs him with a carving knife, like the electric carving knife that you get with a turkey, and then he gets him with like the classic like piano wire around the neck. But he does it, he twists it, and then turns around his back and twists it and pulls it, and it's like a zip tie, and he just snaps his head off.
Yeah,
that was a really cool kill.
Plenty of inventive kills in this one.
You know what I will say, though? You talk about the Boston in this movie. You know the one thing that was missing, and I don't know if this is even a possibility. You know, it would have been perfect if they would have somehow made him like, I know, listen, I like Rick Hoffman, the guy who plays the dad. I'm actually a big Rick Hoffman fan. I think he's great, so I'm not saying that he should have taken Rick Hoffman's place, but like maybe the store manager who's kind of like pissed off, like Gina Gershon's his wife and all that.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it have been perfect? Wouldn't it have been absolutely perfect if they got Bill Burr to play in this movie?
Oh God, no! He would have been fantastic in this movie. He would have been really good. He would have been a great, but that one guy's dad, the guy who sells all the guns. Like if he was that guy's dad, he would have been. That would have been a great little walk-on cameo for him.
Bill Burr is my favorite comedian by like a wide margin. I love Bill Burr. And have you seen the skit he did on Saturday Night Live with the Boston beer where they did Sam Adams? And
yeah, I did. Yeah,
Sam Adams. He's got the full-on Boston accent. He's like, "This is what a real Bostonian it would look like." He's like arguing with this kid in the store, and he's like, and everyone's like, "You can really taste the hops." And he goes, "No, this tastes like shit."
He's fucking funny. He really is.
I love Bill Burr. I was like, that was the one thing I was like, man, if you would have got Bill Burr in here, it would have been perfect.
Yeah. He deserved a little walk on. I can't believe they. Well, I mean, maybe they tried and they couldn't get him, but he would have been great in this movie.
Yeah, he's a good actor too, by the way. He's actually,
Yes, he is. He's good. He's really good in King of Staten Island with him and Pete Davidson.
He was great in that movie. He was really
and he's got a lot of work to do. So little Bill Burr tangent, but yeah, he would have been good in this too.
Yeah. Let's talk about best scare because this is a horror movie at the end of the day, Patrick. So what was your best scare in Thanksgiving?
I'm going to be honest. This movie's like light on scares. You know, it's really about slashes.
Yeah, it's not really about jump scares.
No, not really at all. But there was one that got the fuck out of me. And it's like, it's when all the kids are at the high school, the game just got canceled because another murder pops off. Again, you're going, why are the cops being so incompetent? Well, Eli Roth made sure to make it make sense why they're being incompetent. And the kids that are being targeted are alone in the school together, and they're being lured in by the killer. And I can't remember the name. Was it Scuba? No, it wasn't Scuba. Or was it?
It was
the other guy. He was kind of the obnoxious friend.
It was Evan.
Yeah, Evan. Evan's kind of the dipshit he's kind of the rod of the whole group.
He's the one who's like taunting. He's the one taunting the crowd outside. Like, look, I'm in here and you're not in here. Fuck you.
Yeah, he was a real dipshit, and you didn't understand why anybody was friends with him. But him and his girlfriend are kind of charging down the hall, and there's just this moment because he's trying to find Jess. He thinks Jess is somewhere in there that she's calling him over. And he turns around this corner, and the timing was just so good where he goes, well, that's weird. And then out of nowhere, John Carver's like in your face and grabs them. And it totally got everybody in the theater, but it got me too. I was like, whoa, I did not see that coming.
So that was definitely the best jump scare because that one got me too. He just turns around a corner, he puts a bag over their head. Like you see the bag coming. It's like a 2-second thing. You're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
By far the best. There wasn't a lot of jump scares in this movie. I will say for like a horror movie, the slasher, there wasn't a lot of that. But also, again, I appreciate that because sometimes one thing I do criticize slashers a little bit is sometimes they try to shoehorn in too many jump scares and it just doesn't work. This one worked. That one worked. It was good. So that legitimately is the best scare. But I'm going to go with one other one that I picked. And I'm shocked you didn't pick this one, Patrick. I actually totally thought you were going to pick this one.
Do tell.
The end of the movie, their fucking Friday the 13th homage in the final scene. Jess stops the killer. The pilgrim gets defeated. John Carver gets defeated.
Oh, yeah.
And Jess is laying in bed with her boyfriend Ryan, and she thinks she hears a noise in the closet, and she investigates and nothing's in there. But then a second later, the flaming John Carver, who got caught up in basically a giant fireball that exploded and killed him, comes running out of the closet at her on fire and like attacks her, and then she wakes up and it's a dream. It was 100% Friday the 13th of what's her name in the boat.
Oh yeah. Alice in the boat.
Alice in the boat, and then Jason comes out of the water, and then you find her in the hospital, and she's like, "Where's the little boy? Where's the little boy?" And like, "What are you talking about? We just found you." It was that. She wakes up and she's actually just in bed with Ryan. But I loved that. I was like, man, he literally just was like, "Hey, Sean Cunningham, I'm going to do your movie over, except I'm going to put the killer in a closet instead of a lake."
And set him on fire. You know why it didn't scare me? Because I thought visually it was just so great. I was enjoying how great it looked.
Didn't really scare me, but when I realized what he was doing, I was like, "Oh, it's so perfect! It's the
totally
13th lake scare."
Yeah, I mean, he was tried and true to a proper slasher fake out at the end.
I appreciated that. I was like, "That is awesome! Like, way to go with that." Let's talk about best gore, and let me give credit where credit's due. This is okay. So one of my biggest criticisms of I Know What You Did Last Summer and a couple other slashers that I really enjoyed. Like probably my biggest criticism of Halloween H2O, which is a 90s slasher that I love. I love Halloween H2O. Not nearly gory enough. They don't show enough of the kills. I'm like, man, like if you would have just ratcheted it up a little bit with the kills, this would be an A+ movie. Same thing with I Know What You Did Last Summer. Now I Know What You Did Last Summer is a little bit better, but again,
yeah,
they're trying to appeal to a wider audience, even though it's R-rated. They're not trying to go too far. Eli Roth said, no, we're going all the way.
We go all the way
in this movie, and I love it. And I will say, for my theater, when the biggest reactions were the gore. That's when people were like, "Oh shit!" That's when I heard the biggest reaction out of the crowd. So Patrick, what was your favorite gore in Thanksgiving?
My favorite gore was one of the very early kills, which was, well, I call it half off at the right mark, because he's chasing down the woman in the diner. She's a waitress at the diner, and it's kind of a sequence, and I appreciate that about pretty much all the slashers in this movie. They're not like a single kill. It kind of like he tries to kill them, misses a little bit, and then there's a chase ensues, and then he slashes them. So that he kind of builds to an ending. It's a great way going forward that I think more slashers should take this approach, where they kind of build on it. There's sort of a false kill and then a final kill. Very much that way with the diner scene, because she ends up going outside. She escapes him. You think the freezer part is the kill that's going to happen. It's not there. She gets away. She gets out into the back, and he runs her over as she's trying to escape into a dumpster, and splits her in half. And so half of her body goes flopping off. And then later on, he decides to make an example by plopping her half of her body on top of the right mark to let everybody know, I'm coming for you.
Yeah, I love that. That was the first one. That was the first kill. And when he slams that car into the garbage disposal and her body gets chopped in half, and I was like, oh shit. Like, I was like, God, they're not pulling punches in this movie. Like, I was wondering like what was gonna happen. And when she got chopped in half, I was like, damn. That was like really gruesome, really, really gruesome one. That was well done. I enjoyed that one as well. And that was honestly my early pick for best gore. There's a lot of gore in this movie, Patrick.
There's a lot.
Yeah, so my best gore, I had two, and I know I'm cheating here with two, because one's not really super gory. It was just a really cool effect. And it's not a kill, because that's not how so I'm kind of doing it as a combo.
Mm-hmm.
So we meet a character by the name of Yulia, who is the girlfriend of Scuba. She's Scuba's girlfriend.
Yeah, Scuba's girlfriend.
Yeah, and Yulia has like this hardcore Russian father who, once people start getting killed, he's like, fuck this, we're going to Florida. I'm not sticking around. Guess what? Smart dad.
Yep.
He didn't get out of town quick enough, because as they're packing, the Carver comes for them. And he goes upstairs, and first thing he does to her is, everyone knows those little corn sticker things you put on the end of a corn on a corn on the cob to eat, right? The little twisted things you put in. They stab at the end of the corn on the cob, and that's how you eat it. Brilliant. And it's in the trailer, by the way. This is not like me ruining anything. Like, it's in the trailer as well. Takes it and just stabs her in the ears. And it's such a cool effect. And then, like, she pulls him out. She's obviously deaf at that point, or nearly deaf, doesn't really hear anything. And so she's, like, fucked up. So that's part one. But it doesn't kill her, because these are little tiny little.
Yep. It's the false kill.
So he pulls her and he's holding her hostage. And when Scuba and Jess come in, at this point, Scuba has a gun. So he's got a gun pointed at the Carver. But the Carver, John Carver, when the gun doesn't go off because he's got the safety on like a jackass, that's what they told him. Don't forget to put the safety on, or you'll blow your nuts off. He puts the safety on, forgets to take it off. So he pulls the trigger, it doesn't work. So he takes Yulia and chucks her onto a saw, like a table saw. They're remodeling their house. Clicks it on, throws her on the table saw, and she just saws right up the whole table.
So good.
Saw. Guts go flying, the blood splatters all over Jess and Scuba, and it's just a gruesome kill. And the gore is fantastic, because when she flops off and falls off the table, her guts are just everywhere.
It comes spilling out, and full spoiler for the next category, the buzzsaw kill's my favorite kill in the movie, because I'm like, wow, what a fucking great kill, because you know it's coming. You see that they're in the room with the buzzsaw, and you're like, who's getting buzzsawed, and how's it gonna happen? And it's just brutal. It's so brutal, and it ends with that great splatter of gore. Her whole torso just ripped open by the buzzsaw. So good.
And I also love that afterwards that she's getting like held by her boyfriend, and you just see her like guts everywhere. Like they didn't just stop at her getting buzzed. No. You got to take that moment of like, oh man, you're dead. Oh my God, I miss you. And then, you see the guts just like laying there.
Yeah, no, the Eli Roth don't play around when it comes to gore. You know, you're getting good gore with him.
So my favorite kill happens at Hanover High School, the rival high school, and the one asshole boyfriend or the one asshole guy who got in the fight early in the movie, and he's one of the people who storms the gates and goes in. Now John Carver just snaps his neck, and it's a classic 80s story. Like somehow he's got superhuman strength. He twists the guy's head around and kills him. But then his cheerleader girlfriend is teasing him like they're going to have sex on a trampoline.
Mm-hmm.
So she's jumping on the trampoline. She flashes him her ass. She's jumping, and then the Carver puts the knives through the bottom of the trampoline. She first slashes her Achilles tendon, and then she falls backwards, and he slashes her from underneath the trampoline. A+ for creativity, and also a really cool, gnarly kill.
It's one of those ones that really makes you go, oh shit. It's very like nail in the stair that somebody steps on barefoot. It's 100% that vibe. Like she's jumping super fucking high. So she's got all this like velocity going. And then when that knife comes up, you're like, oh, no. And then it hits the Achilles tendon and you're like, ooh, that sucks. And then next one, she falls onto it and you're like, oh, okay. It just had that. It wasn't like the most gruesome kill. It's just one of those ones that you're just like, that just feels like it sucks.
And that, like I said, the creativity.
Totally.
I'll be honest, there's a lot of, I almost went with the stepmother being roasted alive.
Oh yeah.
That was super gnarly too. Like when he literally bakes her, like cooks her in an oven. And like, I think we've talked about in this show before, like I think burning to death has got to be one of the worst ways to die. Like in reality, imagine just being cooked to death. And then later, another gore scene is when the Carver literally chops off a piece of her thigh. Oh, it's so disgusting. And then you see the dad, Thomas, played by Rick Hoffman. He's got a gag in his mouth. He starts vomiting through the gag, which is pretty gross in and of itself. But that whole like baking his wife was pretty gnarly.
It was, and then carving into the skin, and it's like this. It's human flesh that's kind of cooked. I was like, man, that's good.
That's real gnarly, man. Really gnarly. All right, so let's talk about. So this is now, to be fair, I will say this is not the first horror film set in Thanksgiving. There have been other horror films set at Thanksgiving. Credit where credit's due. Now this one is actually called Thanksgiving, so it's kind of a little bit more obvious. But there are other holiday films set at Thanksgiving, not as prominent as, let's say, Christmas, where we have films like Silent Night, Deadly Night, Krampus, and there's a long list of Christmas horror films. So, Patrick, you came up with this category. Would you like to explain it, and we'll make our picks here?
Yeah, so I just said, boy, there's a lot of holidays that are actually a lot of ancillary holidays that are not the most popular ones that are starting to gain popularity, that more people are recognizing these days. So I add a category saying, what is the next great holiday slasher? Because you could do horror, but you can play with supernatural, like Krampus is like supernatural and shit like that. But I was like, what would make a good holiday slasher that we don't see a lot of? So my pick was Dia de los Muertos, which is a very popular Mexican holiday that is gaining popularity in America because Mexican culture permeates throughout American culture. Because first and foremost, the costuming for Dia de los Muertos like makes for great proper like a slasher look. Like imagine a black sombrero and fucking the skull paint and all that shit. Like there's way there, and then the idea of like, it's a day to remember the dead. So like if there was an inciting incident a year before and you come back around to it, well, there's tons of motive there. I was like, this is just ripe for a good slasher. It's got the visual element, it's got the dead family element. Like you could make something really fun out of that.
I have a friend who lives in Arizona who celebrates that, and she does her paint with the skulls and everything, and it's fucking awesome.
We've done it a couple times here, not much. We've done it a few times.
But she does like full on, like I'll send you photos of. You haven't seen it either, but like she does the full on paint and everything. It's fucking awesome. Like it's really cool. So that when you said that, I was like, damn, you got me. I don't think I can really beat that if I'm being honest. So mine's not nearly as good. I'll just warn you ahead of time. You got me beat. You got the winner here. I almost said, originally I was going to go with, I thought about New Year's Day because there's so many Christmas slashers. New Year's Day, we have Terror Train, which is set on New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, which is an interesting one. I like that movie. But again, it's kind of like the forgotten holiday because so many focus on Christmas because they're a week apart. So I almost went there, but I decided to go in a different route. And this is an interesting one. I don't know the premise. I don't know how I would sell this. But I'm going to go with, there's a big holiday in October, we all know, Halloween. That's the holiday very near and dear.
I've heard of it.
Yes. But earlier in October, there's another holiday that used to be called Columbus Day. Now it's called Indigenous Peoples Day. However you want to frame it. There's a horror film there. And here's what I said.
Yes.
Have you ever seen, I don't know if you've ever seen it, the episode of The Sopranos called Columbus? And the entire episode is the Italian mafia crew getting pissed off that there are indigenous people holding protests to celebrating Christopher Columbus because they what he really was. He was a murderer, a slave trade. Like, he was a bad person. Like, he was not terrible person. Probably not a guy you should be celebrating. But because he's Italian, all the Italians take it as like that's their holiday. Well, it ends up being this big clash between like indigenous people and Italians, like fucking with this holiday. It's a crazy episode. I love that episode. But I'm thinking, you know what? It's called Columbus Day, but now it's called Indigenous Peoples Day. There is a ripe opening for a horror film. And it's the other holiday in October that's not Halloween.
Damon, I almost went with it. I literally I was almost going to go with that one, but I was like, I wonder if I've done that one before. I almost say I feel like we've done a category like this in the past. And so I was like, I can't remember if I did it or not. So I went with Dia de los Muertos instead, but it's funny. My brain was going to that as well. I go, that would be a fucking rad slasher, like a really good slasher. And it would kind of be on the wavelength of a Thanksgiving because of the Bostonian culture and the Italian culture. You know, they're not like the same thing, but the point is that there's a heightened culture there that you can play with.
Oh yeah, you could set this in Little Italy or something, and holy shit, you could have a great slasher. You
really could. It'd be very interesting.
Yeah, I think there's a great slasher in there. Yeah, I'm glad we were on the same wavelength with that one because I couldn't beat yours. You win. That's yours is better. I'm not gonna lie, yours is better. But I was like, you know what? This is interesting. This is different, and there's never been one done before.
Yeah. I would like to see both. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So Patrick, I'm gonna kick off this next category, which is one of our favorites, which is remake, sequel, or leave it alone. And this is the category where we take the film we just are reviewing and we say, should they remake it? Should they give it a sequel, or should they just leave it alone? Is this a good standalone film? And I'm going to go first here because this is a slasher. Unless this film absolutely positively bombs, which I don't think it's going to do. There's a lot of buzz about this movie. I'm sure it's going to do well. And to be fair, horror movies have been one of the most consistent theater-going movies since the pandemic ended. So I think this is going to do well. There's going to be a sequel to Thanksgiving, and I already know the title. I'm just going to give it to you right now and tell me that this is not the perfect title for this sequel. I Know What You Did Last Thanksgiving.
I mean, it's sitting right there for you. It's right there. You know what I mean? Like I'm right there with you. This needs to be a sequel, and they do very wisely leave it open for a sequel. All they do at the end is say, "Oh, you know that explosion was so big, there ain't nothing but ash left back there, but we got no body." And I go, "Okay, well they're saying that for a reason because they didn't find him. So that means we're going to get something else coming back down the line." Yeah, I can't wait for a sequel, to be honest with you, because I think they're going to go bigger and badder. I think that's just Eli Roth's like mantra is like, well, if we're sequeling this, it's got to be crazier. The kills have got to be nuttier. Like, it's got to go way more over the top. Like, I'm more excited for Thanksgiving sequel than I even was for this, and I was pretty excited for this to begin with.
Like, I can tell you right now, like at the end, there's enough survivors that the opening kill is going to be one of our people from the first movie who made it out alive, and I'm picking Bobby. I'm picking Bobby as the kill.
I would like it to be Evan because he's a fucking little shit.
Maybe Evan, that's fine, but I was saying Bobby because he helped Jess escape, and he's the opening kill. You brutally kill him. They're at college now because this is all supposed to be their senior year of high school.
I think so, yeah.
In college, and that's why I said, because that's what the premise of I Know What You Did Last Summer, and then I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, because I Know What You Did Last Summer was their senior year, and then a year later, it's their first year of college, and everyone's, still dealing with the aftermath of the tragedy that happened a year before. That's why I said, like, I got so many I Know What You Did Last Summer vibes from this movie in the best way possible. That's why I said I Know What You Did Last Thanksgiving. How is that not just like the perfect title for the sequel?
I'm ready. Let's go. I'm sure they're already planning a sequel. I'm sure of it.
100%. And you know what? Dude, give me a franchise. I love it. I love franchises in horror, and I love when you have a theme, and it's a Thanksgiving theme. Dude, I would love it if they came out with one of these every couple of years on Thanksgiving. How fun would that be?
Let me tell you something. Thanksgiving, my least favorite holiday. I would love it if there was a Thanksgiving slasher movie to go see every year. That would be just my tradition.
How is Thanksgiving your least? All you do is eat.
It's a garbage. First of all, I don't like hanging out with family members. little inside dirt here. Like, I don't like family gatherings at all. So it's like, that's number one, like the big one. Number two, turkey's not that great. It's not a great food. I'm not very interested in turkey, and most of the other side things I'm not into. I like ham, and that's ham and like stuffing. And it's like, well, I could have that any fucking time. I don't need to have like my weird aunt here bugging me about shit, and so I can eat ham and stuffing. It's just, I don't like it.
So I do like Thanksgiving food, so that's one thing. But also, I have the advantage that I don't have any family living near me. Now that it is my girlfriend, so we just cook a dinner together. And so we don't generally make turkey, though. We actually usually make something different. This year we're making chicken and dumplings, like homemade chicken and dumplings, and all the fixings. And I'm like, you know what? We're just going to sit around, and the two of us are going to watch a movie and eat a big ass plate of fucking food. So that's because I don't have to deal with my family. Thanksgiving is like my favorite holiday because it's just eating. Like, there's no... you don't have to worry about buying presents. You don't have to worry about like going anywhere. Like, it's just me and my girlfriend at home eating a fuck ton of food. So I love it, but that's just me. But I understand your side of it, where you just like, at least at Christmas, if you're gonna hang around family, at least you get presents for it.
At least you get presents, yeah. But I also fucking hate Christmas too. Like a jet.
No, I'm not. I feel about Christmas the way you do it. Like, we went to the store today. We're at Target and they're playing Christmas music already, and I was like, God, no, please stop already. I know it's the season technically, but oh no.
I hate the music. I hate the fucking decorations. I even hate the presents, Damon. Even the best part about it is like annoying too, because then it's like, now I have a bunch of shit I don't want or need.
I understand that. Yeah, I'm not a big holiday person. We are full on fucking over here on Ron.
Very much. And basically, the holiday season ends for me October 31st. And I'm like, okay, it's over.
I'm kind of the same way, because like I said, I tolerate Thanksgiving because of the food, but yeah, I don't really like that, because Thanksgiving is the precursor to Christmas, and I hate Christmas. So
yeah.
Patrick, next category is, can we survive this horror film? Now, this is one of my favorite categories that we've done on this show, which is where you and I inject ourselves into whatever film we're reviewing, and we say, can we survive it? This one's particularly fun because it's a slasher. If you look behind me, you can see all the masks. I'm a huge slasher fan, obviously. Patrick, I'll ask you first. Thanksgiving, are you surviving this horror film?
I don't, now if you put me in the no, Damon. Anyway, I break this down, I guess the answer is truly no. And why specifically for this movie, specifically for this Thanksgiving movie, is that the sheriff had the upper hand the whole time. So no matter what I did, he was 2 steps ahead of me. It took a mistake on his part to get caught. He even talks about that in the movie, that the killer gets caught when they make a mistake. Well, he made a mistake. If he hadn't have made the mistake, he'd have kept on going until he won completely. He would have killed Jess. He would have gotten everybody because he was ahead of the game. I never would have saw it coming. He would have got the jump on me. I would have taken a fucking a boat to the face or something like that.
So I'm going to lean towards I would survive for only one reason. Like, in reality, I would probably be more McCarty, the guy who's like the Black Sabbath fan preaching about Ronnie James.
Sure.
But put myself in one of the characters' shoes. If I had to relate to any of the characters in the friend group, I would probably say I'm most like Scuba. I'm the proactive one. I would be the one to be like, all right, fuck this guy. Let's go get a gun and we're going to fight back. Now, the reason I say I'm surviving because Scuba survives. Scuba survives the killing, but only because Jess manages to break herself free and she helps Scuba break free, which makes the killer come after them. Everyone else is still tied up. So it's really just a matter of happenstance that he survives. Like, he could have easily been killed in that same moment when they're all sat at this gruesome dinner table with the cooked stepmother in the middle of the table and her, I mean, it's the most disgusting thing of that. He could have easily just killed. So technically I survived because Scuba survived, but he could have easily just gotten his throat slashed or his head chopped off in that moment just as quickly. So technically, I think I would survive, but I also know I wouldn't because, again, it's just a matter of, it's just a matter of circumstance that he makes it out of there. The John Carver guy could have easily killed him versus somebody else. So technically, I'll say I survived because I'd be the proactive one to be like, let's go get a gun or let's go get something and we're going to go after this guy. We're not just going to sit back and let him pick us off one by one. So in that regard, but probably not because, I'm actually shocked. My actual surprise, one surprise I have at this movie, is that Scuba was the big, muscular kind of football player. Now, I'm certainly not that dude. I'm a big guy. I'm certainly not big and muscular. Big muscular dude. My thought was the killer should have taken him out first because physically he's the biggest threat to the killer.
Yeah.
He can actually fight back. He didn't know, so I was like, all right, well, you're kind of going outside the norms a little bit and let him survive, which, again, I appreciate. This film doesn't just give you the obvious ones, just like the killer reveal. We didn't totally get that when it happened. But the fact that they let Scuba survive is like, oh, damn. They like generally, he'd be one of the first people picked off.
Yep, not this time. Yeah, but I think the killer didn't pick him off because the killer was very focused on getting very specific revenge. And he always had the upper hand. He always knew what was going on. And Scuba was not high on that list of people that he needed to kill.
Yeah, but I appreciate that he survived. So in that regard, I'll say I survived. But I also know, there's just as good of a chance that I'm the fucking security guard who gets his head lopped off. So it's a slasher, like I said, and I'm not a final girl. So the chances of me surviving are pretty slim.
Not yet, Damon. We could make you into a final girl. We can make that happen.
There are very rare instances. We'd have to do a series on this about final boys because there have been a few.
There's a couple.
There's a few, but not many. So, all right, Patrick, our last category, which I love that you switched this up. Our last category is typically, is it scary? And that's where we tell you as basic as we can whether a film is scary or not. But this one's a little different.
Yeah, Damon, I said, what really matters here is it slashy? We knew this was the big slasher of the year. There's certainly been other ones this year that have come out and promoted themselves as slashers, but we knew this was the biggest slasher coming. And so my question to you is it slashy?
Yes. This is the ultimate slashy. This is Slasher 101. This is, as I said at the start of the show, he studied Wes Craven. He studied Sean Cunningham. He studied My Bloody Valentine. He studied Prom Night. He studied I Know What You Did Last Summer and Kevin Williamson. He did all that. And then he took it and rolled it up into one big ball of wonderful and rolled it out as this movie. It is a throwback. It is a slasher. I'm not going to say classic yet because I got to see it a couple more times, but I have a hard time believing that this time next year at Thanksgiving, I'm not going to want to pop this movie on and enjoy it.
Absolutely. Excuse me, Damon. Absolutely a slasher. Just to the bone. This is very much a slasher. It does not deviate from the template, and nor should it, because that's how you get an entertaining movie.
It's great. It's great. This is, like I said, this is an annual watch. I have a feeling next Thanksgiving, because again, that's what we've done around the holidays. Like I said, with Christmas for me, I watch National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, which is, the best Christmas film ever made. I'm sorry.
Scrooged.
I'll watch Die Hard, which is a great Christmas film. And if I'm watching horror, I like to watch Silent Night, Deadly Night, or maybe I'll watch Gremlins, which we reviewed on this show before. I like Gremlins. So Thanksgiving next year, I'll watch Thanksgiving because now I have a Thanksgiving horror film.
Yeah, now we do. I sure hope it's somewhere that I can easily watch it next year.
I love it. Just fun. This is such a fun movie, man. Like I had such a blast watching this in the theater. And also, again, because this is in theater, go see it in the theater. Go see it in the theater, please. Don't get me wrong. However you watch it is fine, but
apparently you need to go on a Friday night. Like don't go during the day or on a weird time on a Thursday. You need to go on a Friday night and go see it with a big crowd.
Go see it. This movie's so much fun. Like I said, probably one of my favorite experiences of horror this year. Just a fun slasher. All right, folks, that is our episode for this week. We appreciate everyone tuning into the show as always. If you got questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review, please never hesitate to reach out to us on email. You can reach us at rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's rotlivingdead@gmail.com. And you can also send us messages on social media. We are on all of your favorite social media platforms, Twitter, X, Facebook, and Instagram. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead. You'll find us over there, and we also have a YouTube channel. Leave comments over there if you like. We will take those as well. So just search Rewind of the Living Dead on YouTube. We are soon for the holiday, Patrick. I want to announce this today. We're going to be doing a little giveaway soon. You don't even know about this yet. I haven't told you about this. I'm not privy to it. So everyone knows a couple weeks ago they did the Terrifier 2 re-release into theaters. And if you went to see Terrifier 2 in the theater, you got a little 11 by 17 poster of Terrifier 3. Well, your old pal Damon has like 10 extra posters of Terrifier 3. So I haven't figured out how we're going to do it yet because not everyone got to go to it. I'm sure you've all seen it online. But if you'd like a copy of the Terrifier 3 poster, I think I have like 10 of them. We're going to do a giveaway sometime in the next couple weeks before Christmas. I haven't figured out how we're going to do it yet, whether we're going to do it on social media or through the show. But if you haven't seen the Terrifier 3 poster and you want one, we're going to figure out a way to give away some Terrifier 3 posters. I don't know. Again, I haven't figured out how we're going to do it yet, but we're going to do it. I snagged a bunch of them for that reason. I went to the theater today and they had just sitting out, and I was like, can I take a bunch of these? They're like, sure. So if you didn't get one and you want a Terrifier 3 poster, I got you covered. So we're going to do some sort of giveaway in the next few weeks for that. Obviously, as always, thank you for tuning in. Obviously, listen to us on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and as I mentioned earlier, please go like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're trying to build on that. And if you ever have questions or comments, please don't ever hesitate to reach out to us personally. You can find us on our own social media channels. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, for everyone that tunes in each and every week to Rewind of the Living Dead. We'll be back next week with a new episode. Enjoy your holiday, because this will drop during Thanksgiving week. Enjoy the movie Thanksgiving, and thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then.
Peace.